I'm Charlotte, 35 years old. I live with my 5-year-old daughter Olivia and my husband Joseph, who is the same age as me. While I'm a homemaker, I also run a side business from home. Back in high school, I got hooked on programming. After graduating from a university with a degree in information systems, I worked as a systems engineer. The job was intense, with daily overtime. Joseph and I met in college, and we started dating then. When I became a working adult and was often unavailable due to my job, he would cook meals at home and wait for me, always supporting me in various ways. I had always lived with my parents, but at 27, I moved in with Joseph, and we got married when I was 29. After marriage, Joseph told me, "No need to push yourself too hard." So, I quit my job to focus on trying to conceive, shifting to a side business that leveraged my skills. Soon after, I got pregnant. Joseph and I decided to find a home where our child could grow up freely and bought a second-hand house near his parents' home. Our house isn't too old, and the neighborhood is filled with families raising children. Although it's a bit far from the station, I consider ourselves lucky to have bought it for around $100,000. The house is spacious, and Olivia, now a bit older, enjoys running around freely inside and tending to flowers in the garden. It's a great environment for her. Currently, I'm busy every day with housework and parenting, while also managing my side business without overburdening myself. But things started to change with Joseph after Olivia was born. This story goes back to when Olivia was about 8 months old. My mother-in-law Jennifer began visiting often and started criticizing our parenting. She would say, "This is wrong, that's wrong," and although some of her advice was good, she also imposed some incorrect information which was frustrating. There's no one right way to parent, which I believe is true, but I didn't want to rely on methods I knew were wrong. Moreover, even when I explained to Jennifer that a certain approach was now considered correct, she would stubbornly insist, "My way is right. I raised my son well, so if you listen to me, you won't go wrong," making any discussion impossible. To protect my child, I refused to follow any parenting methods that are now considered incorrect. Then complaints started coming from Joseph. "Why do you dismiss my mom? She's trying hard to help Olivia grow up well. You're new to parenting, right? If you leave it to my mom, there won't be any problems." "But Jennifer says to ignore Olivia when she cries. That'll just teach her that crying gets her whatever she wants, and we shouldn't spoil her with holding too much. I get the logic, like not buying toys for a child throwing a tantrum in a store, but Olivia is still an infant. If she cries, I need to hold her immediately and make her feel loved and secure, right? What do you think?" "I don't know anything about parenting." "She's your daughter too. Can you just be ignorant about this? Do you even realize you're a father?" "Stop nagging. You have an easy, short-time job and relax with simple housework and parenting. My mom is busy too, yet she makes time to come here and help." "That's none of my concern. I never asked for her to come. If I were to ask for help, I'd prefer it be from my own parents." "Oh, is that so? Poor mom." Whenever we argue, Joseph just shuts down the conversation and starts playing mobile games. It always goes this way, so we never really have a discussion. Gradually, I stopped expecting anything from Joseph. No matter how bad our relationship got, as long as we appeared as a good couple in front of Olivia, that was enough for me. And so, 5 years passed. I could still tolerate living with the three of us if I didn't expect Joseph to participate in housework or parenting. However, Joseph, who has turned into a mama's boy, carelessly agreed to his parents' suggestion to move in with us. I definitely couldn't bear living with Joseph's parents. Apparently, they thought it would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone to live with us, instead of traveling to see their grandchild. They wanted to dote on their grandchild and see their beloved son every day. Although I chose a house with many rooms, thinking that we might need space for caregiving eventually, after experiencing Jennifer and Joseph's attitudes, I didn't want to live with them. I called Joseph's family home to decline, but my father-in-law George raised his voice and blamed me. "Who do you think you are? You're living off my son. The head of the household's opinion should not be opposed by a son's wife. These days, too many young women don't value their husbands." You don't realize that while you're leisurely at home, my son is out there fighting. You should just step back and follow my son's orders." I gradually pulled the phone away from my ear, waiting for the rant to end while nodding, and after hanging up, I confronted Joseph. "Hey, aren't you the head of this household?" When I asked Joseph, he nodded, "Yes." "Then refuse the idea of living with George and Jennifer. The head of the household's opinion is supposed to be right. I should just listen to your orders, right? So tell them we won't live together." But Joseph averted his gaze and changed the subject. "Don't worry, it'll be fine. My parents are easygoing, so it'll be easy to talk to them, right? Just live like we always do." Easygoing? Are you serious? And it's not that simple. Why can't you understand that? The one who doesn't understand is you. My parents are different from other father-in-laws and mother-in-laws. You'll see once we start living together. Joseph seemed a bit troubled by the situation. In the end, Joseph did not refuse the cohabitation, and 3 months after the conversation started, his parents, having terminated their rental apartment lease, moved into our house. Jennifer, in her early 60s and a housewife, stopped doing any household chores after moving in, and George, in his late 60s, already retired, was home all day. Joseph's so-called easygoing parents turned out to be a lie. They imposed their old-fashioned views on me and constantly complained. When I was working on my side business in my room, Jennifer suddenly barged in and started banging on the walls, saying, "Charlotte, what are you doing? This is no time to be playing on the computer. You're a housewife, aren't you?" "I'm not just a housewife," I replied. "I need to work to support our finances. Please don't disturb me." When I sent Jennifer out of the room, she came back with George. "Hey, a son's wife should protect the home and support her husband. What are you thinking, working? Quit immediately." "I can't do that. We need money for Olivia's future, and living on Joseph's salary alone would be just scraping by. I can't just quit because you say so." I tried to convince Joseph's parents of the necessity of my work, but they insisted that a son's wife working was a shame to Joseph, and told me not to even have a side job. Since then, I started locking my room when working and wore headphones to block out their voices. But there were more problems with Joseph's parents. They overindulged Olivia, giving her sweets whenever she asked, resulting in her refusing dinner. I understand that they love their granddaughter, but their spoiling her is causing issues. Then Jennifer blames me, saying, "It's because Charlotte's cooking is awful. Learn to cook from Jennifer. It's pitiful that our son married someone who can't even cook." George added, looking down on me, "It was just the worst. And there's more. I have a best friend, Isabel, from high school, who often visited after I got married. But after Joseph's parents moved in during a tea party at my house as she was about to leave, Jennifer approached her and said, 'So, you're Charlotte's friend? Birds of a feather flock together, huh? I bet you're also a lousy wife. Listen here, you must not oppose your husband's parents and do as they say. A wife's duty is to serve her husband and his family.'" When Isabel heard Jennifer's words, she just chuckled. Funny thing to say, isn't it? Don't worry about me. My in-laws always tell us to be kind to each other, even if we're imperfect. They advise me not to worry about the parents and to focus on cherishing my own family. Jennifer had nothing to say in response to Isabel's words. Isabel smiled at me and said, "Next time, come over when my mother-in-law is around. She's really easy to talk to, and I think she'll get along well with you, Charlotte." And then she left. Jennifer glared at me with a frown and said, "They say you can tell a person by their friends, and it's true. That girl and you are both impudent and unladylike. Such a disappointment as a wife." Fundamentally, I just don't share the same values as Joseph's parents. If it were just a matter of differing values, we could coexist without negating each other and build a good relationship. But Joseph's parents are convinced they're always right and I'm always wrong. Their attitude towards Isabel was terrible too. A person with normal sensibilities wouldn't say such rude things to someone else. The fact that they looked down on Isabel just because she's my friend was infuriating. That night, although I didn't expect much, I decided to talk to Joseph. If he sided with his parents, I had my own plans. I desperately wanted him to be on my side, even just once, to give me a reason to see him in a new light. I told him about the harassment and what Jennifer said to Isabel. But Joseph's response was apathetic. You're comfortable now because I let you quit your job, right? Since I've helped you relax, you should naturally tolerate living with my parents. And your friend is strange too. Arguing with my mom? I'm sure her in-laws must be troubled by her. The moment I heard that, I decided to divorce him. Oh, I see. Understood. I replied sarcastically, and Joseph became sulky. We didn't speak anymore after that. 3 months later, I started preparing my revenge against Joseph and his parents, and now everything is finally in place. Before going to bed, I spoke to Joseph. It had been a while since we had a real conversation, as we had become a couple in appearance only. I said, I've decided to sell the house. There's already a buyer. Please leave this house by the month after next. Joseph turned away sullenly, and the conversation went no further. The next day, I packed my things, left a note saying, I'm going back to my parents' house, and took Olivia with me. My parents' home, while further than Joseph's, was still accessible as it's near the next station. Before we started living with Joseph's parents, Jennifer often came to see Olivia, making it hard for us to go out freely. And after moving in together, it was even harder to visit my parents. When I arrived, my parents warmly welcomed us. Olivia was initially shy, but quickly grew more attached to my parents than to Joseph's. Joseph called several times afterward, but I ignored him, and eventually he stopped calling. 1 month after I returned to my parents' house, Joseph and his parents showed up at our doorstep, looking desperate. The doorbell rung insistently, and Olivia, startled, clung to me. I held her to reassure her. Mom was out at that time, so it was Dad, George, who immediately responded. What do you want? After not contacting us for a month since my daughter and granddaughter came back, what brings you here now? By the way, we've started preparing for divorce with a lawyer. Relieved to see Dad, I asked Olivia to wait in her room upstairs and headed to the front door. Dad and Joseph were arguing across the door. The door was secured with a chain lock, and Joseph and his parents were peeking through the gap. Yesterday, someone came to the house saying they'll be living there from next month. What's this about? My daughter should have told Joseph already. The house is sold and there's a buyer, so you need to leave by the end of this month. Didn't you hear? Joseph then shouted at Dad. That's a lie, right? Why did you really sell it? It's our house. Don't do whatever you want. Return the money to the buyer and make them give up. Exactly. Even though she's our son's wife. Our son bought that house, didn't he? What right does she have to do such a tyrannical thing? Joseph, hearing his dad's words, averted his eyes and seemed to be sweating nervously, realizing Joseph likely understood that his dad's excuses wouldn't hold up. I walked up to the door and stood next to Dad. Long time no see, George, Jennifer, and Joseph. What right, you ask? I bought that house with money I saved before getting married. What's wrong with me selling it? At my words, George became even angrier, shouting, You bought the house? But your job is just playing around, right? That house cost $100,000 as I heard. Could you even afford that? Ah, so that's what Joseph told you? That's all lies from him. That can't be true. Our son wouldn't lie. Even Jennifer started to complain, seemingly in defense of Joseph. Do you want to see the contract? Before marrying Joseph, I worked in a demanding black company. I was promoted to a managerial position in my mid-20s. Plus, I lived at home, so I saved most of my salary. When I married Joseph, I had nearly $200,000 in savings. We didn't spend much even after moving in together. I paid the full amount for that house, thinking it was a good environment to raise Olivia. It saved us from paying rent or a mortgage. Joseph was too proud to admit that I paid for everything. Suddenly, Joseph let out a pitiful cry. Stop, please. Everyone turned to him in surprise. Joseph knelt down, looking down, and started to cry weakly. I was wrong. I've always been ridiculed for being weak or too nice. After getting married and having Olivia, I thought I could be the boss at home. Before we married, you had a higher income and more savings than me. I thought if I could support you as a housewife, I could also feel important. You always respected me. So why are you revealing now that you're more amazing than me?" I was just astounded by Joseph's words. Before Olivia was born, I always thought he was a kind person. But that was never meant to belittle Joseph. Rather, it meant he was warm-hearted and someone who made me feel safe and comfortable. "I guess my feelings never really got through to you. Let's get a divorce. We can't be a good family in the future. I liked the kind you who was gentle and considerate, even if a bit timid. I don't like you when you're obsessed with who's more important, or being the head of the family. In fact, I hate it. If you're only going to negatively influence Olivia's upbringing, she doesn't need a father like that." Joseph was slumped in defeat. His parents wanted to see Olivia at the end, but I said, "You didn't even try to see her for a month. To George and Jennifer, she's just a plaything to dote on, isn't she? My parents might be strict with Olivia, but they show her love and care, unlike you who just spoiled her." With those words and a glare, they left disappointed. They didn't seem willing to fight for their granddaughter. Joseph and his parents soon left the house. By the way, Isabel and her husband bought the house I sold. They used to visit regularly before the cohabitation, so they knew the layout and wanted to live there. When I told Isabel I was selling the house as revenge against Joseph and his parents, she and her husband liked the location and layout. After regularly visiting and checking everything, they decided to buy it. Since they were friends, I sold it to them at a very low price, and Isabel's family was very happy with the deal. After Joseph and his parents left, Isabel quickly moved into that house and is now happily living there with her 2 children and husband. However, my problems weren't over yet. I had my lawyer contact Joseph, and finally we started discussing the divorce. Joseph, perhaps shocked by what I said, agreed to the divorce without much fuss. We divided the property evenly, and of course the money from the sale of the house was also split between Joseph and me. Since then, Joseph has been paying child support and visits Olivia once a month. Joseph seems to have done some soul-searching since then, trying to figure out what he can do, who he is, and making an effort to live his own life. To do this, he moved away from his parents and is currently not in contact with them. Occasionally, Joseph's parents ask me how he's doing, but since I only see him once a month, I don't know much, and just give vague answers, leading them to stop calling me. According to a neighbor I was close with when living in the old house, Joseph's parents moved to a cheaper apartment nearby. Apparently, they've aged significantly since Joseph left. The 2 people who had harassed me so much were no longer spiteful, instead appearing weak and frail. Maybe that was their true nature. Joseph was timid by nature, and perhaps his parents were not really strong people either. Half a year after the divorce, I took Olivia to meet Joseph for their visitation. Joseph, looking troubled, asked, "If I grow into a person I consider respectable, could we start over? Would you accept me again as your husband and Olivia's father?" I couldn't answer immediately. "If I remarried you, your parents would come along, right? I don't want that," I said, dodging the question, but I did wonder for a moment if there could be a future with Joseph again. However, it was only a fleeting thought. Dreaming about it seemed impossible. Restoring a broken trust is not easy. I've been living at my parents' house, sharing household responsibilities with my mom, working and taking care of Olivia, and making enough money from my side business. I cherish my time with Olivia and don't feel a pressuring need for a husband. But if, in the not-so-distant future, I find myself contemplating a reunion with Joseph, at that time I decided to entrust my future to who I would become. I was confident I would make the right choices for Olivia's sake.